So 7-4, simplify and verify trig identities. Okay. So let's go ahead and copy down. We'll just do one at a time. Go ahead and copy down cotangent divided by cosecant. This is our first example. This is number 1. So we're going to simplify that. Cotangent divided by cosecant. Now, one of the things I recommend you do in the beginning when you're learning how to simplify and verify is try to rewrite everything in terms of sine and cosine. That would be my recommendation, my little hint, as we start working through these puzzles. So if you need to, we're dividing two trig identities. What is cotangent equal? All right, cotangent is equal to cosine theta divided by sine theta. And we're dividing that by cosecant. Cosecant is 1 over what? And if you're not sure, you can cheat and look at your pink sheet at the top. But what is cosecant equal to? Who's the sister to cosecant? So that means that cosecant is 1 over sine. So what we're going to do is divide these two, which means we're doing a copy, change, flip, or keep, change, flip. So I have cosine over sine divided by, and I'm going to flip, sine over 1. And what happens when I do that? What's going to cancel? Yes, Nathan. You're so right. It is copy, change, flip, first period. So this changes to multiplication. All right, so we have cosine over sine multiplied by the reciprocal, which is sine over 1. All right, so what's going to happen here? The sine is going to cancel. And that's going to leave me with just cosine, and that would be my answer. So cotangent divided by cosecant is cosine. That's it. Let's look at the second one. Let's look at number 2. Go ahead and copy this one down. This is a pretty easy one. Secant divided by cosine. So we're going to rewrite this one. Multiplication, yes. Did I say division? Yes. I'm just not awake today, y'all. I'm sorry. It's first period. Secant multiplied by cosine. All right, so there's a multiplication symbol here. Secant is the sister to who? Cosine. So secant can be written as 1 over cosine. And that's multiplied by cosine. And so what's going to cancel out? The cosine. So secant divided by cosine is just what? Secant multiplied by cosine is just 1. All right. And it's something that you may want to just note. Maybe you want to write this down. But anytime you multiply two sisters, you get 1. So secant times cosine is 1. Cosecant times sine is 1. Cotangent times tangent is 1. And that's really important because, again, this is a puzzle. Okay? Right now we're doing simplifying where we don't know where we're trying to go. But when we get to verifying, we know the end that we're trying to get to. And knowing these little tricks is going to help you get there. Okay? So when you multiply two sisters, you get 1. All right, I want you to try to do number 3 by yourself because number 3 is very similar to number 1. So I'm going to give you about 60 seconds or 2 minutes to try to work through that one by yourself. Take tangent divided by secant. All right, who wants to volunteer what you got? What'd you get?
I got sin x.
Sin x. Can you push my phone on silent for me? All right, who else got sin x? All right, perfect. So, because we know tangent is sine over cosine. And we're dividing that by secant, which is 1 over cosine. If we do our keep, change, flip, we would flip our 1 over cosine. It becomes cosine over 1, so it simplifies to just sine. So these are some of the easier ones. They get a little harder. Any question about these first 3? But again, I think it's helpful as you're starting to simplify and verify to rewrite things in terms of sine and cosine. All right, so let's turn up the volume just a little bit. Let's look at number 4. Go ahead and copy down number 4. All right, does anyone recognize what this is? Sine squared plus cosine squared. That's the Pythagorean identity. Good. And if you look on your pink sheet, I think it's the first thing under Pythagorean identity. It's that second section, yeah. What does this equal? Sine squared plus cosine squared. What does that equal? 1. So we can actually sub this whole thing out. It becomes a 1. And it becomes 1 over cosine. And what is 1 divided by cosine? Secant. That's your answer. So the key is you keep going until you run out of things you can do. The only thing I could do at this point is rewrite this as 1 over cosine. So now I'm going backwards. So I'm going to keep going until I can't do anything else. All right, go ahead and copy down number 5. Now number 5 I think would be the first one that might be a little meaty. So we got sine x plus tangent x divided by 1 plus secant x. So let's start with the numerator. All right. And that's really the best way to do that. So let's start with the numerator. I'm going to put an N for numerator. All right. So I'm going to take sine x and add that to tangent. Tangent can be written as what? Because remember, we want to write this in terms of sine and cosine. So if you look in that last column where it says quotient identities, what is tangent equal to? Sine over cosine. Okay, so we got sine over cosine. So that means I have to add these two fractions. Now, what do you have to have, though, in order to add fractions? A common denominator. So I need to multiply this one by cosine, because I don't have a cosine in my denominator here. So I'm going to multiply this first one by cosine. And when you have your common denominator, we can bring our numerators together. So now my denominator is cosine. And then I'm just going to go straight across and write what I have as my numerator. So right here, this is my numerator. So my numerator is cosine times sine plus sine. All right, anything else? Would you see something I could do in the numerator? We can't add these together because these aren't like terms. So this is the same as xy plus x. Like, they're not like terms, so we can't add them together. But could I do something else, though? You can't cancel either. So, like, over here, so, like, I couldn't cancel that. You can't cancel when it's an addition. So let's think about something else. These are all good thoughts, but they're not mathematically sound. Let's think about what we did on the test yesterday. Took out our GCF, right? What is our GCF of this numerator? What do they both have? A sine. Let's take out. I'm sorry, Angelina, did you say that? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I'm like, dang, you sound mad. It's like I didn't hear you. Okay, so we're going to take out our sine. And when I take out the sine, I'm left with a cosine plus, and what's the invisible number in front of this sign? 1. All right. So we went as far as we can go with the numerator. Can't go any further. So we're going to let that sit on the stove, let that simmer a little bit. Now let's talk about the denominator, okay? So now let's see, what is our denominator? All right, so my denominator has 1 plus secant x. So let's start by rewriting secant. As a matter of fact, let me just take that off. What is secant? Secant is 1 over what? Secant is 1 over cosine. And again, we need a common denominator. So this is really a 1 over 1. So I'm going to multiply this top and bottom by cosine. So when we make our fraction bar, my denominator is cosine. And then this is what I have going across the top. I have cosine times 1 plus 1. Well, what's cosine times 1? Anything times 1 is going to be whatever it was. So we just got a cosine. Oops. X plus 1. So we don't have, can we take out a GCF up here? I'm going to ask you a trick question. Can I cancel these out? No. Okay, so let's talk about that in terms of terms. If you have x plus 1 over x, we cannot cancel that out. You can't cancel across addition. That's not how that works. So we're actually finished with this one. There's nothing else I could do with my denominator. So now I'm just ready to bring this together. So what I have to do is I have to divide this by this, which means I'm going to do a keep, change, flip, right? So I'm going to keep this the same, change it to multiplication, and then flip it. So I'm flipping this right now. So when I flip it, that cosine moves up, and then cosine x plus 1 moves down. This is a group. I'm going to put parentheses around there because I think that's going to tell you, hopefully you see something. There's two things that can cancel out. So we can actually divide because this is a group. This is a group. If one go, they both go. And because I have the same thing here and here, they can both go away. What else can go away? Yeah. So after all that work, what am I left with? Just a sign. That's what that simplifies down to. Sine x plus tangent x divided by 1 plus secant x is just sine. These are intimidating in the start because you're like, what do I do? What you do is you rewrite it in terms of sine and cosine, and then you follow all of the rules you've learned from 3rd grade up. How do you multiply fractions? How do you add fractions? And you keep going, factoring. You take out a GCF if there's a GCF. You keep going until there is nothing else to do. All right. Go ahead and copy down number 6. And these are our last two for today. Now, if that was multiplication, we would be good because tangent times cotangent is 1. But it's not multiplication, it's addition. So we're going to work with the numerator first. First thing first, rewrite them in terms of what? Sine and cosine. So let's do that. Let me do this in yellow, actually. All right, so numerator, that's what that N stands for. I like to organize my work, make it neat. All right, tangent is sine over cosine. And cotangent is cosine over sine. And I like to bring this back to if this were 3 over 4 plus 4 over 3, you don't have to write this down. I'm adding two fractions, right? I would have to multiply this fraction by what? By 3. And then I would have to multiply this fraction by 4. We're going to do the same thing. I'm multiplying this fraction by sine and this fraction by cosine. That's what I'm saying. We're going to use your math facts that you've learned from 3rd grade up. How do you add fractions? How do you divide fractions? How do you multiply fractions? How do you take out a GCF? All that stuff kind of comes together. So when you figure out what you're multiplying by, realize this. This is my denominator right here. So my denominator is sine cosine. I'm going to stick that in my denominator. This is my denominator. And now we're going to go straight across and simplify what we see that I have highlighted in green. So what do you think sine times sine is? What is x times x? X squared. So what's sine times sine? Sine squared. Yeah, good. So I have a sine squared x plus cosine times cosine, which is what? Cosine x. Cosine squared x. And what do you have here? What is that? What does that equal, Nathan? 1. Because now we have an identity. Sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. So I'm going to leave this as 1 over sine cosine. And I'm going to just leave that on the stove to simmer a little bit. And now let's start seeing what we can do with our denominator. I don't think our denominator is as extra. Oh, it's not actually. So our denominator right here, do that in pink. So our denominator just has a cosecant squared. And our exponents work the same. So if who's the sister to cosecant? Sine. So cosecant squared is the same thing as 1 over sine squared. That's what that is. And that's as far as we can go with our denominator. So now we're ready to bring these two together. I'm going to do a keep, change, flip with these two fractions. So I'm going to keep the 1 over sine cosine and change and flip. Now, I think instead of writing it as sine squared, I'm going to break it apart because I want you all to see what's going to happen here. I'm going to break it apart to sine sine as sine times sine so you can see what's going to cancel. Because sine times sine is the same as sine squared. So I'm just going to break them up. So what cancels is just one of the signs. Just one goes away. Which is going to leave me with what over what? Sine over cosine. And what is sine divided by cosine? Tangent. Tangent would be my final answer. All right, last one. Last one is a little meaty. Oh, but we got 10 minutes, so we got plenty. Oh, we got more than 10 minutes, so we saved the best for last. All right, last one, number 7. Go ahead and copy that down. Now, this is beta, which is a variable, okay? This is a variable like theta, like x. If you don't want to use that, if you want to just make it an x, you can. As a matter of fact, I think I might because I don't want to fool with trying to make a fancy b over and over. So I'm just going to change it to an x. That is totally legit. You can make the variable anything you want to make it. All right, so we're adding two fractions. Ooh, that is an ugly 7. Hold on, let me fix that. That's better. Okay, so we're adding two fractions. What do you have to have in order to add fractions? A common what? Denominator. So we're going to multiply. This looks scary, but it's really not. I'm multiplying this fraction by 1 plus cosine x. And then this fraction I have to multiply by 1 minus cosine x. So I have 1 plus cosine x that I'm multiplying top and bottom by. And then I have 1 minus cosine x that I'm multiplying top and bottom by. So my denominator is going to have both of those groups. It's going to have a 1 plus cosine x and a 1 minus cosine x. That's what I have in my denominator. Okay, so now let's go ahead, go straight across. So I'm actually going to take this and I'm multiplying by 1. So when I take 1 times 1 plus cosine x, I get 1 plus cosine x. Bring down this addition symbol that's in the middle. And when I do the same thing over here, I take 1 times 1 minus cosine x. I get 1 minus cosine x. Okay, so what do you notice here? What's going to cancel in our numerator? So does everyone see how we have a positive cosine and a negative cosine? So that means they're going to cancel out. But what doesn't cancel is the 1s because they're both positive. So I have 2. All right, does anyone recognize in algebra what this is? The difference of, all right, this is the difference of 2 squares. I don't know if most of you all will notice that. So I'm going to go through this with you one time and one time only. But know that if I'm multiplying the same thing that has 1 plus and 1 minus, the only difference is that 1 is positive and 1 is negative. We don't have to make a box. Now I'm going to do it with you just one time. But I expect for you to recognize this pattern. So we're going to make our box this one time. So let's make our box and multiply this out. Since we got time. We're doing really good on time, actually. So when I multiply the 1 times 1, I get 1. 1 times cosine is just going to be cosine. And then here I have 1 times negative cosine, which is negative cosine. And what do you think is going to go in this last box? So we got a positive and a negative, which means it's going to be what? Negative. And then what did you say, Angelina? Negative cosine squared. Yep. That's what goes here. It's a pattern. This is a very common pattern in algebra. Whenever you're multiplying and it's the exact same thing, 1 plus something and 1 minus the same thing, these are going to cancel and you're left with just 1 minus cosine squared. So 1 minus cosine squared is what my denominator is. So I'm not going to do that again. All right. If it's 1 plus sine squared times 1 minus sine squared, then it ends up being 1 minus sine squared. If it's 1 plus sine times 1 minus sine, then it's 1 minus sine squared. Like, we have to know that. All right, so I want you to look under variations of the Pythagorean identity on your pink sheet in that little section that I told you to memorize. What does 1 minus cosine squared? And we also talked about, it was also in the test yesterday. It's a variation of the Pythagorean identity. It's that very first one. What is 1 minus? Look at that the third bulleted point. 1 minus cosine squared is sine squared. So what we have here is 2 over sine squared. Now, the other trick that I want to teach you that kind of helps me is if I have something in my denominator, if I bring it upstairs, it changes to the sister. So right now, I have sine squared in my denominator. And who's the sister to sine squared? Cosecant. So I can bring that upstairs. And if it comes upstairs with a 2, though, it changes to the sister. So my final answer would be 2 times cosecant squared. That would be where I would want you to get to. And that is your final answer. Okay, I'm going to pass out homework 5. No, wait. We're on homework 9. Homework 9 is due this Friday. We're going to continue practicing, though. So this is only our first day. We're going to stay with this a couple of days. So I'm going to pass that out, and feel free to start working on that now.